The gunshot that rang out across the dusty main street of Salvation, Texas, on that sweltering July afternoon in 1876 was not meant for her, but it changed everything anyway. Sarah Bennett felt the bullet whiz past her bonnet so close that the heat of it singed a stray curl near her temple, and she stumbled backward into the wooden post outside the general store, her basket of flour and sugar crashing to the ground in an explosion of white powder. The chaos erupted around her as men shouted and boots pounded against the dry earth, but all she could focus on was the tall figure that suddenly appeared in front of her, blocking her view of the violence unfolding in the street. His broad shoulders filled her vision, his dusty brown coat stretched tight across his back as he positioned himself between her and the danger. She could not see his face, but she saw the gun in his hand, raised and steady, and heard his voice cut through the mayhem like a knife through butter. "Get inside the store, ma'am, now." Sarah did not need to be told twice. Her legs felt like they had turned to water, but she scrambled backward through the door of the general store, where Mrs. Patterson was already herding the other customers toward the back room. The shooting continued for what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute or two, and then silence fell over the street like a heavy blanket. Sarah pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart hammering beneath her palm, and tried to catch her breath. "Lord have mercy, Mrs." Patterson whispered, peering through a crack in the door. "That's the third time this month those outlaws have tried to rob the bank. Sheriff's going to have their heads this time." Sarah moved to the window despite her trembling knees and looked out at the street. 3 men lay face down in the dirt, their hands being tied behind their backs by the deputy and several armed townsmen. And standing in the middle of it all, holstering his gun with practiced ease, was the man who had shielded her. He turned then, as if sensing her gaze, and Sarah got her first real look at him. He was younger than she had expected from the authority in his voice, perhaps 25 or 26 years old, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that fell across his forehead beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His jaw was strong and covered with a few days' worth of stubble, and when his eyes met hers through the window, she saw they were a striking shade of blue-green, like the shallow waters of the creek that ran behind her family's property. He held her gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them that Sarah could not quite name, something that made her breath catch in her throat for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Then he tipped his hat to her, a small gesture that felt strangely intimate despite the distance between them, and turned to speak with the sheriff. "That's Cole Hartley," Mrs. Patterson said, appearing at Sarah's elbow with a knowing look in her eye. "He works the Rocking H Ranch just outside town. Been here about 6 months now, came up from somewhere down south. Good man, from what I hear. Keeps to himself mostly, but he has helped the sheriff out a few times when trouble comes calling." Sarah watched as Cole Hartley shook hands with the sheriff and then walked toward his horse, which was tied up outside the saloon across the street. He moved with a confident grace that spoke of years in the saddle, and when he swung up onto his mount, she noticed how his thighs gripped the animal with easy strength. Heat rushed to her cheeks at the direction of her thoughts, and she turned away from the window quickly. "I should get home," she murmured, gathering what remained of her dignity and her scattered purchases. The flour was ruined, of course, spread across the boardwalk in a fine white dust, but she salvaged the sugar and a few other items that had survived the fall. Mrs. Patterson helped her clean up and insisted on replacing the flour at no extra charge, which was kind considering Sarah's limited funds. Her father had passed away 2 winters ago, leaving her the small farm on the edge of town, and she had been scraping by ever since, selling eggs and vegetables to make ends meet. It was a hard life for a woman alone, especially at 23 years old when most of her friends from school were already married with children of their own. But Sarah had learned to be self-sufficient, and she took pride in her independence, even if it sometimes felt lonely. As she stepped back out onto the street with her repaired basket, she nearly collided with a solid wall of muscle and dusty cotton. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her, and she looked up to find herself staring into those remarkable blue-green eyes. "Careful there," Cole Hartley said, his voice warm and deep. "You have had enough excitement for one day." "I apologize," Sarah managed, acutely aware of his hands still on her arms, the heat of his palms seeping through the fabric of her dress sleeves. "I was not watching where I was going." "No harm done." He released her but did not step back, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Are you all right? That bullet came awful close." "I am fine, thanks to you." Sarah found her voice, though it came out softer than she intended. "That was very brave, what you did, putting yourself between me and the danger like that." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, and Sarah noticed he had a small scar above his left eyebrow that gave him a slightly roguish appearance. "Just instinct, ma'am. Could not very well let a lady get hurt if I could prevent it. Well, I am grateful nonetheless." She shifted her basket to her other arm, suddenly feeling awkward and unsure. Men rarely paid her much attention these days, not since the rumors had started circulating about her condition. The condition that made her damaged goods in the eyes of most potential suitors. "I should be getting home before it gets too late." "You live far from town?" Cole asked, and there was genuine concern in his question rather than mere politeness. "About 3 miles east, the Bennett farm." "It is not too far," his brow furrowed slightly. "That is a long walk, especially after what just happened. Let me give you a ride home." Sarah opened her mouth to refuse automatically, as propriety demanded, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes, or the fact that her legs still felt shaky, or perhaps it was simply that she found herself wanting to spend more time in his presence. Whatever the reason, she found herself nodding. "That would be very kind of you, Mr. Hartley." "Cole," he corrected, taking her basket and securing it to his saddle. "Mr. Hartley makes me sound like an old man." He swung up onto his horse with fluid ease and then reached down to her. "Put your foot on mine and give me your hand." Sarah hesitated for only a moment before complying, placing her small hand in his larger, calloused one. He pulled her up behind him with seemingly no effort at all, and she settled onto the horse's back, very aware of how close she had to sit to him, how her legs pressed against his, how she had to hold onto his waist to keep her balance. She could feel the solid muscle beneath his shirt and the steady rhythm of his breathing, and tried very hard not to think about how long it had been since she had been this close to a man. "Which way?" Cole asked, his voice rumbling through his chest and into her body where she pressed against his back. "East on the main road, then left at the old oak tree," she directed, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole clicked his tongue and the horse started forward at an easy walk. They rode in silence for a few minutes, leaving the town behind them and entering the open landscape of scrub brush and parched earth that characterized this part of Texas. The sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and a slight breeze had picked up, offering some relief from the day's heat. "You live out here alone?" Cole finally asked, breaking the comfortable quiet that had settled between them. "Yes," Sarah admitted. "My father passed away 2 years ago. It was just the two of us, and he left me the farm. That must be hard, working a farm by yourself. I manage." She heard the defensive note in her own voice and softened it. "I have good neighbors who help with the heavier work sometimes, and I have scaled back on what I try to grow. Mostly I focus on the chickens and a vegetable garden now." Cole nodded, and she felt the movement through his back. "Still, that is a lot for one person." "You ever think about selling, moving somewhere easier?" "Every day," Sarah admitted with a small laugh. "But it is my home. My father built that house with his own hands when he and my mother first came to Texas. She died when I was young, and it is all I have left of both of them. I cannot just walk away from that." "I understand," Cole said quietly, and something in his tone made her think that he truly did. Family legacy means something. Roots mean something. They reached the old oak tree, and Cole turned the horse left onto the narrow path that led to her property. Sarah could see the small farmhouse in the distance, its white paint peeling in places, the fence around the chicken coop listing slightly to one side. She saw it through a stranger's eyes and felt a flush of embarrassment at how humble it all looked, but if Cole thought anything negative about her home, he did not show it. He pulled the horse to a stop near the front porch and dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. His hands circled her waist, strong and sure, and he lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. For a moment, after her feet touched the ground, they stood close together, his hands still on her waist, her palms resting on his forearms. Sarah looked up at him and found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and questioning and interested all at once. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything today." "It was my pleasure, Sarah." The way he said her name, having clearly overheard Mrs. Patterson use it earlier, sent a shiver down her spine despite the heat. "I hope I will see you again." "Salvation is not a very big town," she replied with a small smile. "I imagine our paths will cross. I imagine they will." He retrieved her basket from his saddle and handed it to her, his fingers brushing against hers in the exchange. "You take care of yourself out here." "I will." She stepped back, already missing the warmth of his presence. "Safe travels back to the ranch." Cole mounted his horse again, settling into the saddle with practiced ease, but he did not immediately ride away. Instead, he looked down at her, his expression serious. "Sarah, I want you to know something. What I saw today, the way you held yourself together during that shooting, the courage it takes to live out here alone and make a go of this farm, that speaks to a strength most people do not have. You should be proud of that." Before she could respond, before she could process the unexpected compliment and the emotion it stirred in her chest, he tipped his hat to her once more and turned his horse toward the road. Sarah stood on her porch and watched until he disappeared from view, dust rising in his wake, and pressed her hand against her heart where it beat with a rhythm that felt both thrilling and terrifying. That night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the crickets sing outside her window, Sarah could not stop thinking about Cole Hartley. She replayed every moment of their encounter, from the way he had stepped in front of her without hesitation to the warmth in his eyes when he said her name. It was foolish, she told herself, to let her imagination run wild after one meeting. Men like Cole Hartley, strong and capable and undeniably handsome, did not end up with women like her. Women who carried secrets that made them unfit for the life most men wanted. But as she drifted off to sleep, Sarah allowed herself to dream, just for a little while, of what it might be like to have someone like Cole in her life. Someone to share the burden of the farm with, someone to talk to in the evenings, someone whose touch made her feel alive in ways she had almost forgotten were possible. The next few days passed in their usual rhythm of chores and routines, but Sarah found her thoughts drifting to Cole more often than she cared to admit. Every time she went into town, which was twice that week to sell eggs and pick up supplies, she found herself scanning the streets for a glimpse of him. But Salvation remained frustratingly free of tall, dark-haired cowboys with blue-green eyes, and Sarah began to wonder if their meeting had been nothing more than a chance encounter, meaningful only to her. It was on Saturday, exactly 1 week after the shooting, that everything changed. Sarah was in her vegetable garden, fighting a losing battle against the weeds that seemed to sprout faster than she could pull them, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. She straightened up, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, and felt her heart skip when she recognized the rider. Cole Hartley sat tall in his saddle, and as he drew closer, Sarah saw that he carried something wrapped in brown paper. He brought his horse to a stop near the garden fence and dismounted with that same fluid grace she remembered, his boots raising small puffs of dust as he landed. "Afternoon, Sarah," he called, walking toward her with a smile that made her stomach flip. "Hope I am not interrupting anything important." "Just fighting with the weeds," she replied, pulling off her gardening gloves and very aware of how disheveled she must look, with dirt on her dress and her hair falling out of its pins. "They are winning, I am afraid." Cole laughed, a rich sound that seemed to roll across the garden like warm honey. "Weeds are persistent creatures. You have to admire their determination even when you are cursing them." He held out the brown paper package. "I brought you something, to replace the flower you lost last week." Sarah stared at the package, touched by the gesture but uncertain how to respond. "You did not have to do that. Mrs. Patterson replaced it for free." "I know, but I wanted to. Consider it an apology for nearly getting you shot." "That was hardly your fault." Sarah took the package, her fingers brushing his again in a way that sent electricity up her arm. "But thank you. This is very kind." They stood there for a moment, Sarah holding the flower and Cole with his hands now resting on his belt, both of them seeming to search for something else to say. Finally, Cole spoke, his voice carrying a note of hesitation that Sarah had not heard from him before. "I was wondering if you might need some help with anything around here. I have got the afternoon free, and I am pretty handy with repairs and such." Sarah wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to spend more time with this man who had occupied so much of her thoughts, but pride and caution made her hesitate. "I could not ask you to do that. You must have better things to do with your time off." "I am asking," Cole said simply. "And honestly, I would like to help. That fence over there looks like it could use some attention, and I noticed a few loose boards on your porch when I was here last week." Sarah bit her lip, warring with herself. Finally, the practical side won out over pride. She did need help, and having someone as clearly capable as Cole offer, it was a gift she could not afford to refuse. "If you are sure you do not mind, then yes, I would appreciate the help very much." Cole's smile widened, and Sarah realized with a start how much she liked seeing him smile. "I am sure. Point me toward your tools and tell me what needs fixing most." They spent the rest of the afternoon working together, Cole repairing the chicken coop fence while Sarah finished her weeding and then started preparing supper. She found herself stealing glances at him as he worked, admiring the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt, the efficiency of his movements, the careful attention he paid to doing the job right. He had removed his hat after a while, and his dark hair gleamed in the sunlight, slightly damp with sweat. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, painting everything in golden light, Sarah brought out 2 glasses of cool water from the well. Cole accepted his gratefully, drinking it down in long gulps, and Sarah tried not to watch the movement of his throat too obviously. "That should hold for a good while now," Cole said, gesturing to the fence. "But you are going to need some new wood for the porch steps before winter. Those boards are pretty worn through." "I will add it to the list," Sarah said with a wry smile, "right after fixing the barn roof and replacing the pump handle." Cole studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I meant what I said last week. You are doing something remarkable here, keeping this place going on your own, but you do not have to do it completely alone. There is no shame in accepting help from friends." "Is that what we are?" Sarah asked before she could stop herself. "Friends." "I would like to think so," Cole said quietly. "Unless you object to the idea." "No," Sarah said quickly, her heart racing. "No, I do not object at all." They stood there in the golden afternoon light, and Sarah felt something shift between them, something that went beyond simple friendliness or neighborly kindness. There was a connection forming, fragile and new but undeniably real, and it both thrilled and terrified her. "Stay for supper," she heard herself say. "It is the least I can do after all your work today." Cole's eyes lit up. "I would like that very much." Sarah prepared a simple meal of fried chicken, biscuits, and green beans from her garden, and they ate at the small table in her kitchen as the last light faded from the sky. The conversation flowed easily between them, and Sarah learned that Cole had grown up on a ranch in southern Texas, that he had lost his parents to fever when he was 18, and that he had spent the years since then drifting from ranch to ranch. never quite finding a place that felt like home. "What brought you to Salvation?" Sarah asked, passing him another biscuit. "Honestly, I was just passing through, heading north, and the foreman at the Rocking H offered me work. I planned to stay a month or two at most, but something about this place got under my skin." He looked at her over the rim of his coffee cup. "And lately, I have been finding more and more reasons to stay." The way he said it, the way he looked at her when he spoke, made Sarah's breath catch. She had to look away, focusing on her plate, trying to calm the butterflies that had erupted in her stomach. "What about you?" Cole asked. "You ever think about leaving Texas, seeing other places?" "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "When I was younger, I dreamed about traveling east, maybe seeing the ocean, but life had other plans." She hesitated, then decided to share a bit more. "When I was 19, I got very sick, scarlet fever. It nearly killed me, and for a while, everyone thought it would. My father nursed me through it, but the illness left me with complications. The doctor said I would never be able to have children." She had not meant to tell him that, not so soon, not when they barely knew each other. But something about Cole made her want to be honest, to lay her cards on the table before either of them got too invested. She watched his face carefully, waiting for the inevitable reaction, the disappointment or pity or discomfort that usually followed such a revelation. But Cole did not look away, did not shift uncomfortably in his chair. Instead, he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I am sorry you had to go through that. It must have been terrifying." "It was," Sarah said softly, surprised by the warmth of his hand, by the simple comfort of his touch. "But the hardest part came after, when I realized what it meant for my future. Most men want a wife who can give them children, who can help build a family. I cannot offer that." "Sarah," Cole said, and his voice was gentle but firm. He stood up and came around the table, pulling his chair close to hers and sitting down so they were facing each other, knee to knee. He took both of her hands in his thumbs stroking over her knuckles. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to his, expecting to see pity, but finding only earnest sincerity. "What happened to you does not define your worth," Cole said. "You are not less of a woman or less valuable because of something you cannot control. Any man who thinks otherwise is a fool who does not deserve you." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "You are kind to say that, but in reality, Cole interrupted, you are one of the strongest, most capable women I have ever met. You run this farm alone, you survived an illness that kills most people, and you face each day with courage and grace. Those are the things that matter, Sarah, not whether or not you can bear children." A tear escaped despite her efforts, rolling down her cheek, and Cole reached up to brush it away with his thumb. His hand lingered on her cheek, cupping her face gently, and Sarah felt her heart swell with an emotion she was afraid to name. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she whispered. "You barely know me." "Maybe," Cole said, his eyes searching hers, "but I want to know you. I have wanted that since the moment I saw you standing outside the general store. There is something about you, Sarah Bennett, that draws me in, and I do not scare easily." Sarah let out a shaky laugh, aware of how close they were sitting, how she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You should be scared. I am not an easy prospect, barren, stubborn, too independent for my own good according to the church ladies." "The church ladies can mind their own business," Cole said with a hint of humor in his voice. "And I like independent. I like stubborn too when it comes from a place of strength. As for the rest, Sarah, I meant what I said. That does not matter to me." "It might someday," Sarah said, needing him to understand. "If we continue getting to know each other, if this becomes something more than friendship, you might wake up one day and realize you want children, want a normal family, and resent me for not being able to give you that." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his hands still holding hers, his eyes never leaving her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and serious. "I cannot predict the future, Sarah. I cannot promise I will never want children. But I can tell you this. I spent 18 years watching my parents build a life together on their ranch. They had 3 children, me and my 2 sisters, and they loved us fiercely. But you know what I remember most? The way my father looked at my mother every single morning like she was the sun coming up over the horizon. The way they worked side by side, partners in everything. The way they talked and laughed together even after 20 years of marriage. He squeezed her hands gently. What I learned from them is that children are a blessing, sure, but they are not what makes a marriage or a life together meaningful. Love does that. Partnership does that. Finding someone who makes you want to be better, who challenges you and supports you and stands by your side through whatever comes. That is what matters. And if children come into the picture, whether through birth or some other way, then that is wonderful. But if they do not, that does not make a life together any less full or any less worth living. Sarah felt more tears spill over, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude and something that felt dangerously close to hope. "How are you real?" she whispered. Cole smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. "I am just a cowboy who knows a remarkable woman when he meets one." He released one of her hands to brush away her tears again. "Now, I do not want to rush you or pressure you into anything. We can take this as slow as you need. But I want you to know my intentions, Sarah. I want to court you properly. I want to spend time with you, get to know everything about you, and see where this thing between us might lead, if you will let me." Sarah's mind was racing, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Every practical, cautious part of her said this was too fast, too risky, that she should protect her heart and not let herself hope for something that might end in disappointment. But there was another part of her, a part that had been dormant for so long, that was waking up and reaching toward Cole like a flower toward the sun. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Yes, I would like that." Cole's smile could have lit up the entire prairie. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and sweet that it made Sarah's breath catch. "Then consider yourself officially courted, Miss Bennett." They talked for hours more that night, sitting at her kitchen table and then moving to the porch as the heat inside became too stifling. Cole told her about his sisters, both married and living back east now, and about the ranch he hoped to own someday. Sarah shared stories about her mother, whom she barely remembered but whose presence she still felt in the house, and about her father, who had taught her everything he knew about farming and life. It was well past midnight when Cole finally stood to leave, and Sarah walked him out to his horse, reluctant to see him go but knowing he had to ride back to the ranch. "When can I see you again?" Cole asked, his hand resting on his saddle. "I will be in town on Tuesday selling eggs at the market," Sarah said. "Then I will find you Tuesday," Cole promised. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Thank you for tonight, Sarah. For your honesty, for your trust, for saying yes. Thank you for seeing me," Sarah replied softly, "for really seeing me." Cole mounted his horse but paused before riding away, looking down at her in the moonlight. "Sarah, I meant every word I said tonight. You are enough just as you are. Do not ever doubt that." Then he was gone, riding off into the darkness, and Sarah stood alone in her yard with her hand pressed to her cheek where he had touched her, feeling like her entire world had just shifted on its axis. True to his word, Cole found her at the market on Tuesday. Sarah was arranging her eggs in neat rows on her table when she felt a presence behind her, and turned to find him standing there with that familiar smile, his hat in his hands. "Morning, Sarah," he said, and the way her name sounded in his voice made her heart skip. "Morning, Cole," she replied, suddenly shy despite the intimacy of their conversation on Saturday night. In the bright light of day, with other townspeople milling about, everything felt more exposed, more real. "Can I help you carry anything when you are done here?" Cole asked. "Maybe walk you to the general store if you need supplies." "I would like that," Sarah said, grateful that he was not pushing for more than she was ready to give in public. Salvation was a small town and people talked. She was not ashamed of Cole's courtship, But she also knew that any relationship she entered into would be scrutinized by the gossips. They spent the morning together, Cole helping her pack up after she sold out of eggs, and then accompanying her to the general store and the feed shop. He was attentive without being overbearing, funny without being crass, and Sarah found herself relaxing into his presence, enjoying the simple pleasure of having company. At the feed shop, they ran into the foreman from the Rocking H, a gruff man named Douglas who raised an eyebrow when he saw Cole with Sarah, but said nothing beyond a polite greeting. After he left, Cole explained that he had told Douglas he would be late getting back to the ranch because he had personal business in town. "Will that cause problems for you?" Sarah asked, concerned. "No," Cole assured her. "Douglas is a fair man and I work hard enough that he gives me some flexibility. Besides, this is important." He looked at her meaningfully. "You are important." They ate lunch at the small restaurant near the hotel, sitting at a corner table and talking over plates of beef stew and cornbread. Sarah learned that Cole had a passion for reading, unusual for a cowboy, and that his mother had taught him before she died. He had a small collection of books in his bunk at the ranch, including several novels and a book of poetry that had belonged to his father. "Poetry," Sarah teased gently. "I would not have pegged you for a poetry reader." "There is a lot you do not know about me yet," Cole said with a grin. "I am a man of mystery and depth." "Oh, is that so?" "Absolutely. For instance, you probably do not know that I am an excellent dancer, that I can cook a decent pot of chili, and that I am secretly afraid of spiders." Sarah laughed, a genuine, full laugh that felt wonderful. "Spiders, really?" "They have too many legs," Cole said seriously, but his eyes were twinkling. "It is unnatural." Their courtship settled into a pattern over the following weeks. Cole came to visit Sarah at her farm whenever he had free time, which was usually 1 or 2 evenings during the week and most of Sunday afternoons. He continued to help with repairs and heavy work around the property, but it became clear that his presence was about more than just being useful. They talked for hours, discovering each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. They cooked meals together, worked side by side in the garden, and sat on the porch in the evenings watching the sun set over the prairie. Cole was patient with Sarah, never pushing her for more physical affection than she was ready to give, but there were moments when the attraction between them was almost tangible. A brush of hands when passing a tool, the way his eyes followed her when she moved around the kitchen. The time she stumbled on a loose stone and he caught her, holding her close for just a moment longer than necessary, his face inches from hers. It was 6 weeks into their courtship when things changed. They had spent the afternoon working on clearing out the old barn, a hot and dusty job that left them both sweaty and tired. Sarah had gone into the house to pump some cool water, and when she came back out with 2 full glasses, she found Cole standing by the corral fence, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hat pushed back on his head, looking out at the land with an expression she could not quite read. "Everything all right?" she asked, handing him his water. "Yeah," Cole said, but there was something heavy in his voice. He drank the water in silence, then set the glass down on the fence post. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." He turned to face her fully and she saw conflict in his eyes. "Do you trust me?" The question surprised her. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I do." "Why?" Cole took a deep breath. "Because I need you to trust me when I tell you something. I have been wrestling with whether to say anything, but it does not feel right keeping it from you." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "What is it?" "Last week, when I was in town, I heard some of the ladies from the church talking. They were saying things about you, about us. Saying that I was wasting my time courting a woman who could not give me children, that you were selfish for accepting my attention knowing what you could not offer." Pain lanced through Sarah's chest, sharp and familiar. She had known this was coming, had known that the town gossips would have their say eventually, but hearing it still hurt. "What did you say to them?" she asked quietly. "I told them to mind their own business," Cole said flatly, in slightly less polite terms than that. But Sarah, I need you to hear me now. I need you to understand that what those women think, what anyone in this town thinks, does not matter to me. The only thing that matters is what you and I build together." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I have spent the last 6 weeks getting to know you, and every day I find something new to admire. Your strength, your kindness, your determination, the way you laugh at my bad jokes, the way you hum when you are working in the garden and do not think anyone is listening. I am falling in love with you, Sarah. Not with some idea of who you should be or what you can provide, but with who you actually are." Sarah felt tears welling up, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words and the sincerity in his eyes. "Cole." "I know it is soon," he continued, his voice urgent now, as if he needed to get it all out. "I know we have only been courting for a short time, but I am 30 years old, Sarah, and I have met enough people to know when something is real. This is real. What I feel for you is real. And I need you to believe that when I say your inability to have children does not change how I feel, I mean it with everything I am." "I want to believe that," Sarah whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks now. "But I am scared. I am scared that one day you will regret choosing me. I am scared that I am not enough. Then let me prove it to you." Cole pulled her closer, so they were standing chest to chest, her hands pressed against his heart. She could feel it beating strong and steady beneath her palms. "Sarah, you are enough. You have always been enough. And if you will let me, I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that." They stood there for a long moment, Sarah looking up into his face, seeing nothing but truth and tenderness in his expression. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Cole lowered his head and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tender and sweet, his lips soft against hers. Sarah's eyes fluttered closed and she leaned into him, her hands sliding up to his shoulders. Cole's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened slightly, conveying all the emotion and longing that had been building between them for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said again, quietly but firmly. "I love you, Sarah Bennett, and I am not going anywhere." "I love you too," Sarah whispered, finally allowing herself to say the words that had been in her heart for weeks now. "I love you so much it terrifies me." Cole smiled and kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then the tip of her nose, making her laugh through her tears. "Then we will be terrified together. But Sarah, I need you to know something else. This thing between us, this love we have, it is strong enough to weather whatever comes. Strong enough to build a life on, and when you are ready, when you feel certain, I want to marry you." Sarah pulled back to look at him, her heart pounding. "Cole, are you asking?" "Not yet," he said quickly. "I am not asking yet because I want you to be absolutely sure, with no doubts, that this is what you want. That I am what you want. But I am telling you my intentions so there is no confusion. I want you to be my wife, Sarah. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every evening. I want to build a life with you, whatever that life looks like." Sarah felt something inside her chest crack open, something that had been closed and protected for so long. Hope flooded in, real and bright and terrifying, and she let it come. "I want that too," she said. "I want all of that with you." They held each other as the sun sank lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, and Sarah felt like she was standing on the edge of something momentous, something that would change everything. But this time, instead of being afraid of the change, she found herself ready to embrace it. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deepened even further. Cole began staying later into the evenings, reluctant to leave, and Sarah found herself counting the hours between his visits. They talked about everything, from the practical matters of what their future might look like to the deeper questions about faith and purpose, and what made life meaningful. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out, Cole brought up the subject that Sarah had been both hoping for and dreading. "Sarah, I have been thinking a lot about what you said about children, and I want to make sure we are on the same page about something." Sarah tensed slightly, but Cole took her hand, his thumb rubbing soothing circles on her palm. I meant what I said about it not mattering to me whether we have biological children, but I have been thinking about other possibilities, and I wanted to know how you would feel about them. What kind of possibilities? Well, there are children who need homes, orphans, and such. If we ever felt called to it, we could give a home to a child who needed one. Or we could be the kind of couple who helps raise the children in our community who are aunt and uncle to everyone's kids. Or we could just build a life that is full in other ways with our work and our home and each other. He turned to look at her. My point is, there are lots of ways to have a meaningful life, lots of ways to love and be loved. I do not have one specific vision of what our future has to look like. I just know I want you in it. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. It seemed she cried a lot around Cole, but they were good tears, healing tears. I have thought about adoption, she admitted. But I was always afraid to hope for it, afraid that no one would want to build that kind of family with me. Then hope for it now, Cole said softly. Hope for all of it. Whatever we decide together, whatever feels right for us, that is what we will do. It was in that moment, sitting on her porch with the man she loved beside her and the vast Texas sky spread out above them, that Sarah finally let go of the last of her fear and doubt. She turned to Cole and said, "Ask me." He looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Sarah, are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I love you, Cole Hartley. I love your kindness and your strength and your terrible jokes. I love how you look at me like I am something precious. I love the life I see when I imagine our future together. So yes, I am sure. Ask me." Cole stood up and pulled her to her feet, his hands cradling her face. "Sarah Bennett, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and my love for the rest of our days?" "Yes," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, yes." Cole let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around in a circle before setting her down and kissing her thoroughly. When they finally pulled apart, both of them grinning like fools, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my grandmother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to the woman who held my heart. I have been carrying it around for 2 weeks now, waiting for the right moment." Sarah looked down at the ring on her finger, simple and beautiful, and felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was real. This was happening. She was going to marry Cole Hartley and build a life with him. And for the first time in years, her future looked bright and full of possibility. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Salvation. Sarah wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit, and Cole wore his Sunday best with a new string tie. The ceremony was small, attended only by a handful of people, including the foreman Douglas and his wife, Mrs. Patterson from the general store, and a few other townspeople who had been kind to Sarah over the years. The church ladies who had gossiped about them were conspicuously absent, but Sarah found she did not care. All that mattered was Cole standing beside her, holding her hand as they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through whatever life brought them. "I, Cole, take you, Sarah, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Cole said, his voice clear and strong. "I promise to love you, to cherish you, to stand by your side through hardship and joy. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of us, to be your partner and your friend. You are enough for me, Sarah. You have always been enough, and you always will be." Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke her own vows, promising to love Cole with all her heart, to support his dreams and share his burdens. When the preacher finally pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The reception was held at Sarah's farm, which now belonged to both of them. Cole had given notice at the Rocking H and had already moved most of his belongings to what they now called their home. He had plans to expand the farm operation, to get more chickens and possibly some cattle, to fix up the barn and build a new fence line. But those were plans for the future. Today was about celebrating, about beginning their married life together. As the sun set and their guests began to leave, Cole and Sarah stood together on the porch, his arm around her waist, watching the last wagons disappear down the road. "How do you feel, Mrs. Hartley?" Cole asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happy," Sarah said simply. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good." Cole turned her to face him, his hands on her waist. "Because I plan to spend every day for the rest of our lives making sure you stay that way." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of gentle touches and whispered words of love. Cole was patient with Sarah, who was nervous despite her love for him, and he took his time showing her all the ways he cherished her. When they finally lay together in the darkness, Sarah rested her head on his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, marveling at how completely her life had changed. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Cole asked, his hand stroking through her hair. "For seeing me, for loving me, for making me believe I was enough." Cole shifted so he could look down at her, even in the darkness. "Sarah, you never needed me to make you enough. You have always been enough. I just feel blessed that you let me be part of your life." The first year of their marriage was not without its challenges. The farm required constant work, and there were lean times when money was tight and the weather was uncooperative. But through it all, Cole and Sarah worked side by side, supporting each other, learning how to be married, how to merge two lives into one partnership. Cole proved to be everything Sarah had hoped for and more. He was a hard worker who took pride in improving their property, but he also knew when to stop and enjoy the moment, to sit on the porch in the evening and watch the sunset with his wife. He made her laugh with his ridiculous jokes and his dramatic readings from his book of poetry. He held her when she had bad days, when the grief over her lost fertility would occasionally resurface, and he never once made her feel like she was less than whole. Sarah, in turn, discovered depths of strength and capacity for love she had not known she possessed. She learned to share her space and her life, to compromise and communicate. She discovered that having a partner did not diminish her independence, but rather enhanced it, giving her someone to lean on when she needed support and someone to share her victories with when things went well. It was a year and a half after their wedding when the subject of children came up again in a concrete way. They were having dinner when Cole mentioned that he had heard in town about a situation at the church. Reverend Williams was talking about a family passing through last week. They were heading west, and the mother died of cholera outside of town. The father has 5 children and does not know how he is going to manage alone. He left the 2 youngest at the church, said he would come back for them when he got settled, but Reverend Williams does not think he is coming back. Sarah put down her fork, her heart already responding to the story. "How young are the children?" "A boy about 3 and a girl about 5, from what I heard. The Reverend has been trying to find families to take them, but most people in town already have full houses." Their eyes met across the table, and Sarah saw her own thoughts reflected in Cole's expression. "Are you thinking what I am thinking?" she asked quietly. "That depends," Cole said, reaching across to take her hand. "Are you thinking that we have a home that could use some children's laughter in it? That we have love to give and a good life to offer?" "Yes," Sarah whispered, her heart pounding. "That is exactly what I am thinking. But Cole, are you sure? This would be a huge responsibility. 2 young children who have just lost their mother and been abandoned by their father. They will need so much patience and love." "Then it is a good thing we have plenty of both," Cole said with a smile. "Sarah, I have been thinking about this for months, hoping an opportunity like this might come along, but I did not want to bring it up until you were ready." "Do you think you are ready?" Sarah thought about it, taking a moment to really examine her heart. Was she ready to be a mother, even if not in the way she had once imagined? Could she open her home and her life to children who would need her? "Yes," she said finally, with growing certainty. "Yes, I think I am. I think we are." Cole grinned and stood up, pulling her into his arms. "Then tomorrow we will go talk to Reverend Williams." The next morning they rode into town together in the wagon Cole had purchased a few months earlier. Sarah's hands were trembling as they walked into the church, and Cole squeezed her fingers reassuringly. Reverend Williams was a kind man in his 50s who had presided over their wedding. When they explained why they had come, his face lit up with relief and hope. "Are you certain?" he asked. "These children have been through a terrible trauma. They need stability and patience." "We are certain," Sarah said, her voice firm despite her nerves. "We want to give them a home." The Reverend led them to the small room behind the church where the children were staying. Sarah's first glimpse of them made her heart clench. The boy, who the Reverend said was named Tommy, was small for his age with dark hair and solemn brown eyes. The girl, Lucy, had light brown hair in tangled braids and a wary expression that broke Sarah's heart. "Tommy, Lucy," Reverend Williams said gently, kneeling down to their level. "These are Mr. and Mrs. Hartley. They would like to talk to you about coming to live with them on their farm." Lucy immediately pulled her brother close, her small face defensive. "We are waiting for our papa. He said he would come back." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at the fear and hope in the little girl's voice. She knelt down too, making herself as non-threatening as possible. "I know you are waiting for your papa, sweetheart, and if he comes back, we will make sure he knows where you are. But in the meantime, you and Tommy need a place to stay, somewhere safe and warm with good food and people who will take care of you. Would you like to come see our farm? There are chickens and we have a creek where you can play when it is warm." Tommy looked up at his sister, his eyes wide and uncertain. Lucy chewed on her lip, clearly torn between her instinct to protect her brother and the appeal of what Sarah was offering. "Will you split us up?" Lucy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Reverend said most people only want one child. "Never," Cole said, speaking for the first time. He had been standing back, letting Sarah take the lead, but now he stepped forward and knelt beside her. "You two are family, and families stay together. If you come with us, you both come." "That is not negotiable." Something in Cole's firm, honest tone seemed to reach the children. Lucy relaxed slightly, and Tommy took a tentative step forward, looking up at Cole with curiosity. "You have a horse?" Tommy asked shyly. "I do," Cole said with a smile. "His name is Thunder." "Would you like to meet him?" Tommy nodded eagerly, and just like that, the ice began to break. They spent an hour at the church, talking with the children, answering their questions, and slowly building trust. By the end of it, Lucy and Tommy had agreed to come home with them for a visit, to see the farm and decide if they wanted to stay. The ride back to the farm was quiet, both children sitting in the back of the wagon with wide, uncertain eyes. Sarah kept turning around to check on them, offering encouraging smiles that Lucy was slow to return. But when they arrived and Tommy saw the chickens, his face lit up with the first real expression of joy Sarah had seen from him. "Can I chase them?" he asked excitedly. "You can try," Cole said with a laugh, "but they are pretty fast. Why do not you give it a go?" Tommy took off running, and even Lucy could not help but smile at his enthusiastic, unsuccessful attempts to catch a chicken. Sarah and Cole exchanged a glance, and Sarah felt hope bloom in her chest. The first few weeks with Lucy and Tommy were challenging. The children had nightmares, sudden mood swings, and moments of intense grief for their mother. Lucy was fiercely protective of Tommy, sometimes to the point of being aggressive if she thought he was being threatened. Tommy was clingy and anxious, crying at unexpected moments and refusing to let either Lucy or Sarah out of his sight. But Sarah and Cole met every challenge with patience and love. They established routines that gave the children a sense of stability. They listened when the kids wanted to talk about their mother and held them when they cried. They slowly introduced the children to the work of the farm, giving them small, age-appropriate chores that made them feel useful and included. Cole was particularly good with Tommy, spending hours teaching him about the animals and letting him help with simple repairs. Sarah worked on building trust with Lucy, teaching her to cook and garden and braiding her hair in the evenings while they sat on the porch. It was 2 months after the children arrived that Lucy first called Sarah Mama. They were baking bread together, and Lucy needed help reaching the flour on the high shelf. "Mama, can you get that for me?" she asked without thinking, then froze when she realized what she had said. Sarah's eyes filled with tears and she knelt down to Lucy's level. "It is all right, sweetheart. You can call me Mama if you want to. I would be honored." Lucy's eyes welled up too. "But my first mama, your first mama will always be your mama," Sarah said gently, pulling the little girl into her arms. "Nothing can ever change that, and I would never try to replace her. But there is room in your heart for more than one mama, Lucy. You can love her memory and love me too. They do not cancel each other out." Lucy buried her face in Sarah's shoulder and sobbed, releasing grief and confusion and fear she had been holding inside. Sarah held her and rocked her, tears streaming down her own face, and felt the bond between them solidify into something unbreakable. That night, as Sarah and Cole lay in bed, she told him about what had happened. Cole pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "You are an amazing mother," he said. "Those children are so lucky to have you." "We are lucky to have them," Sarah corrected. "I never knew my heart had this much room in it." Tommy started calling Cole Papa shortly after that, and the four of them became a family in truth. The adoption process was begun, and 6 months later, it was official. Lucy and Tommy Hartley were legally their children, with all the rights and protections that entailed. Life settled into a new rhythm. The farm continued to grow and prosper under Cole's management, and Sarah found that running a household with children was exhausting but incredibly rewarding. Lucy grew from a wary, defensive child into a confident, helpful girl who loved working in the garden with Sarah and reading the books Cole brought home from town. Tommy lost his clinginess and became an adventurous, curious boy who followed Cole everywhere and dreamed of becoming a cowboy like his papa. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Sarah by taking her into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant, a rare luxury. They left the children with Mrs. Patterson, who had become a friend and regular source of support, and dressed in their finest clothes. As they ate, Cole reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "Do you remember 3 years ago when you told me you could not have children?" Sarah nodded, wondering where this was going. "I told you then that you were still enough, that it did not change how I felt about you, and I meant every word. But Sarah, I want you to know that these last 3 years have been the happiest of my life. Building this family with you, watching you become a mother to Lucy and Tommy, seeing the love and care you pour into them every day, it has been an honor and a privilege. You are not just enough, Sarah. You are everything." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she was smiling. "I used to think that not being able to have biological children meant I could never be a real mother. But Lucy and Tommy have taught me that family is not about blood. It is about love and commitment and showing up every day. They are as much my children as if I had given birth to them." "And there might be more," Cole said, his eyes twinkling. "Reverend Williams told me last week about another situation, a baby girl whose mother died in childbirth and whose father cannot care for her. He asked if we might be interested." Sarah's heart skipped. "A baby? Cole, are you serious?" "Only if you want to," Cole said quickly. "I know Lucy and Tommy keep us busy and a baby is a lot of work, but I thought I should at least mention it." Sarah thought about it for only a moment before nodding eagerly. Yes, I want to meet her." The baby girl, whom they named Rose, came home with them a week later. She was 3 months old with downy blonde hair and blue eyes, and Sarah fell in love with her immediately. Lucy and Tommy were fascinated by their new sister, and watching them learn to be gentle with her filled Sarah with a joy so profound, it almost hurt. Cole proved to be a natural with the baby, walking the floor with her at night when she was fussy and changing her diapers without complaint. Sarah often found him in the nursery they had set up in the spare room, holding Rose and singing to her in his deep, rumbling voice. Their family was complete, Sarah thought as she watched Cole with their 3 children one evening. This was what she had never known she wanted, what she had thought was impossible. But here it was, real and beautiful and hers. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. The farm expanded, becoming one of the most successful small operations in the area. Cole hired on a couple of hands to help with the work, and they built a larger barn and a proper bunkhouse. Sarah's vegetable garden became known throughout the county, and she started selling produce at the market alongside her eggs. Lucy grew into a thoughtful, intelligent young woman who loved books and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Tommy became his father's right hand on the ranch, learning everything Cole could teach him about horses and cattle. Rose grew into a bright, energetic child who kept everyone on their toes with her curiosity and spirit. Through it all, Sarah and Cole's love for each other only deepened. They still sat on the porch in the evenings after the children were in bed, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. They still looked at each other across the dinner table and shared secret smiles. They still thanked God every night for bringing them together, for the life they had built. When Sarah was 30 years old, 7 years into their marriage, something unexpected happened. She had been feeling tired and queasy for a few weeks, and when the symptoms persisted, Cole insisted she go see the doctor in town. Sarah assumed it was just exhaustion from running after 3 active children, but she went to put his mind at ease. The doctor examined her and then sat back with an expression of surprise. "Mrs. Hartley, I am not quite sure how to tell you this, but you are pregnant." Sarah stared at him in shock. "That is not possible. The doctor told me years ago that I would never be able to have children." "Medicine is not an exact science," the doctor said gently. "Sometimes the body heals itself in ways we do not expect. Sometimes what we think is permanent damage turns out to be temporary, or sometimes we were simply wrong in our initial diagnosis. But I am quite certain, Mrs. Hartley. You are about 3 months along." Sarah rode home in a daze, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach. She had long ago made peace with her inability to have biological children. She had 3 beautiful children she loved with all her heart, and that had been enough, more than enough. But now this impossible gift that she had never expected. When she got home, Cole was in the barn and the children were doing their chores. Sarah found him mucking out stalls and just stood in the doorway watching him, trying to find the words to tell him. Cole looked up and saw her standing there. His expression immediately shifted to concern. "Sarah, what is wrong? What did the doctor say?" She walked toward him slowly, and Cole dropped the pitchfork and closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders. "Sarah, you are scaring me. Are you sick? Is something wrong?" "No," Sarah said, her voice coming out as a whisper. "Nothing is wrong, Cole. I am pregnant." Cole stared at her for a long moment, his face blank with shock. "But I thought—" "So did I," Sarah said, starting to laugh and cry at the same time. "But the doctor is certain. I am 3 months pregnant." Cole's face transformed, moving through disbelief to wonder to pure joy. He let out a shout of excitement and picked Sarah up, spinning her around before setting her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Wait, should I be doing that? Is it safe? Are you feeling all right?" Sarah laughed, her hands coming up to cup his face. "I am fine. The baby is fine. We are all fine." "We are having a baby," Cole said, wonder in his voice. "A baby, Sarah, after all this time?" "I know," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I never thought this would happen. I had made peace with it, but Cole, I am so happy, so incredibly happy." "You know what this means, do not you?" Cole asked, his hands gentle on her face. "What?" "It means that all those years ago, when I told you that you were enough just as you were, I was absolutely right. You did not need to be able to have children to be worthy of love, to build a family, to be complete. We already had all of that. This baby is not what makes us a family, Sarah. It is just another beautiful addition to the family we already built." Sarah broke down completely then, sobbing with relief and joy and love. Cole held her close, rocking her gently, and whispered words of love and reassurance. They told the children that evening at dinner. Lucy, now 13, squealed with excitement at the idea of having another sibling. Tommy, 11, looked slightly horrified at first but then seemed to warm to the idea. Rose, just turned 5, wanted to know if the baby could be her pet. "No, sweetheart," Sarah said with a laugh. "The baby will be your brother or sister, just like Lucy and Tommy." "But I want a puppy," Rose said with a pout, making everyone laugh. The pregnancy was not easy. At 30 years old and with her medical history, Sarah had more complications than a younger, healthier woman might have. But the doctor monitored her carefully, and Cole and the children rallied around her, taking over most of the household chores and letting her rest when she needed to. On a cold February morning in 1884, Sarah went into labor. Cole rode like the wind to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Patterson, who had assisted at countless births. Lucy took charge of Tommy and Rose, keeping them occupied and calm while Sarah labored upstairs. It was a long, difficult labor that lasted nearly 20 hours. There were moments when the doctor looked worried, and Cole never left Sarah's side, holding her hand and wiping her brow and telling her how strong she was, how much he loved her. Finally, as the sun rose on a new day, Sarah gave one last tremendous push and a baby's cry filled the room. The doctor held up a squirming, red-faced infant and announced, "It is a boy." Sarah fell back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure but laughing with relief and joy. Cole was crying openly as the doctor placed the baby in Sarah's arms, and she looked down at the tiny face of her son, marveling at the miracle of his existence. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." They named him James, after Sarah's father, and he was welcomed into the family with more love than any child could possibly need. Lucy and Tommy doted on their baby brother, and Rose, who had been the baby for so long, adjusted to being a big sister with surprising grace. As Sarah recovered from the birth, she often found herself overwhelmed by the beauty of her life. She would stand in the doorway of the nursery, watching Cole rock James to sleep, and marvel at how far she had come. From a woman who thought she would never have a family, who thought she was not enough, to this. A husband who loved her unconditionally, 4 beautiful children, a thriving farm, and a life richer than she ever could have imagined. One night when James was about 6 months old, Sarah and Cole finally had a moment alone on the porch. It was a rare, warm evening in early spring, and the children were all asleep inside. Cole pulled Sarah into his lap, his arms around her waist, and they sat in comfortable silence watching the stars. "You remember that day at the general store?" Sarah asked suddenly. "When you stepped in front of me during the shooting?" "How could I forget?" Cole said with a smile. "That was the day my life changed." "Mine too," Sarah said softly. "I was so lost back then, so convinced that I was broken and worthless because I could not have children. I had built my whole identity around what I could not do rather than what I could. And now?" "Now I know better," Sarah said, turning to look up at him. "You taught me that I was enough, Cole. You saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. And because of that love, I learned to see myself differently. The children we have adopted and the child we miraculously conceived, they are all incredible blessings. But they are not what make me valuable. They are not what make me worthy of love. I was worthy all along. I just needed you to help me see it." Cole kissed her then, slow and sweet, pouring all his love into the gesture. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you are the one who taught me that lesson. Before I met you, I was drifting, looking for something to make my life meaningful. I thought maybe it was owning land or having children or achieving some kind of success. But you showed me that meaning comes from love, from partnership, from building something beautiful with another person. You saved me, Sarah, as much as I like to think I saved you." "Then I guess we saved each other," Sarah said with a smile. "I guess we did." They sat together under the stars, listening to the sounds of the night and the peaceful breathing of their sleeping children through the open windows. And Sarah felt a contentment so deep and complete that she thought her heart might burst with it. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Lucy went to school to become a teacher, just as she had dreamed, and eventually married a kind young man from a neighboring town. Tommy stayed on the ranch, working side by side with Cole and eventually taking over more and more of the operation. Rose grew into a spirited young woman with a gift for music, filling the house with piano melodies and songs. And James grew from a baby into a curious, intelligent boy who loved reading and learning and asking endless questions about everything. Through it all, Sarah and Cole remained the center that held everything together. They were partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating victories as a team. Their love, which had started as a spark during a dangerous moment in a dusty Texas street, had grown into something strong and enduring, a foundation upon which an entire family was built. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Sarah by taking her on a trip, just the two of them, leaving the children in the capable hands of Tommy and his new bride. They traveled east for 2 weeks, and Cole took Sarah to see the ocean, fulfilling the dream she had shared with him so many years ago. Sarah stood on the beach with her toes in the sand and the salt spray on her face, holding Cole's hand and watching the waves roll in. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for making all my dreams come true. Even the ones you did not know you had," Cole asked with a smile. "Especially those," Sarah said. She turned to face him fully, putting her hands on his chest and looking up into the face she loved so much. Time had added some silver to his hair and fine lines around his eyes, but to her, he was more handsome than ever. "Cole Hartley, I have loved you for 20 years, and I will love you for 20 more and then another 20 after that." "Is that all?" Cole teased, pulling her close. "I was hoping for at least 60 more." Sarah laughed and kissed him, tasting salt and joy and love, and thought about how different her life could have been if Cole had not stepped in front of her that day. If he had not seen past her perceived flaws to the woman she really was. If she had let fear and shame keep her from accepting his love, but she had not. She had taken the chance, had opened her heart, and because of that, she had been given more than she ever dreamed possible. A love that saw her as whole and complete. Children who filled her days with purpose and laughter. A life that was rich and meaningful and exactly what she was meant to have. That evening, they had dinner at a fancy restaurant near the beach, and Cole raised his glass in a toast. "To my wife, Sarah Hartley, the strongest woman I have ever known. To the life we have built together and the many years still ahead of us. And to the truth that has guided us from the very beginning, that love is not about what you can give or what you can produce, but about who you are. And Sarah, you are everything, you always have been and you always will be." Sarah clinked her glass against his, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "To us," she said simply. "To our love and our family and every beautiful day we get to spend together." They stayed at the beach for another week, walking hand in hand along the shore, watching sunrises and sunsets, talking and laughing and rediscovering each other away from the demands of the farm and the children. It was a gift, this time together, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. When they finally returned home, they were greeted with chaos and joy. The children, even Lucy, who had come home for the occasion with her husband and their new baby, swarmed them with hugs and questions about the trip. The farmhouse was full of noise and laughter and love, and Sarah stood in the middle of it all, holding her first grandchild while her children and husband talked over each other, and felt her heart swell with gratitude. This was her family. This was her life. And it was more than she had ever imagined possible. Years later, when Sarah was an old woman with silver in her hair and grandchildren running around her feet, she would often think back to that day in Salvation when a cowboy she had never met stepped in front of a bullet for her. It seemed like a lifetime ago, and in many ways it was. She had lived several lifetimes since then, each one richer and fuller than the last. Cole was still by her side, his hand still finding hers in the evenings when they sat on their porch, his love still as steady and true as it had been that first day. They had weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs together, and built something that would last long after they were gone. One evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, their great-grandchildren playing in the yard under the watchful eyes of their parents, Cole squeezed Sarah's hand and said, "No regrets." Sarah turned to look at him, this man who had changed her entire life with his compassion and his unwavering belief in her worth. "Not a single one," she said. "You told me I was enough, Cole, all those years ago. You held me close and made me believe it. And because of that, because of your love, I got to live a life beyond my wildest dreams." "You were always enough, Sarah," Cole said, his voice still strong despite his age. "I just helped you see what was always true." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah rested her head on Cole's shoulder and listened to the sounds of her family, her legacy, all around her. This was what love had built. This was what happened when two people saw each other truly, loved each other completely, and believed in the power of enough. And it was beautiful. More beautiful than anything Sarah could have ever imagined back when she was a lonely woman on a struggling farm, convinced she had nothing to offer. Cole had shown her otherwise. He had loved her not despite her perceived flaws, but because of who she was in her entirety. He had given her children when she thought that door was closed forever, had given her a family and a home and a life filled with purpose and joy. The story of Sarah and Cole Hartley became something of a legend in salvation, passed down through generations as an example of true love and the beauty of family in all its forms. Their descendants would tell the story of how a cowboy fell in love with a woman who thought she was broken, how he showed her that worth is not measured by what we can produce, but by who we are, and how together they built something that lasted. But for Sarah and Cole themselves, the story was much simpler. It was about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose love over fear, and who built a life based on acceptance, respect, and unwavering commitment. It was about the power of being seen, of being valued for your true self rather than for what you can offer. And it was about the simple, profound truth that Cole had spoken all those years ago and had proven every day since. You are enough. You have always been enough. And you always will be. As the years went on and Sarah and Cole grew older, their love story became the foundation upon which their entire family was built. Lucy, now with 3 children of her own, had inherited her mother's strength and her father's compassion. She taught in the one-room schoolhouse in Salvation and was beloved by all her students. She often brought her family to the farm on Sundays, and Sarah loved watching her daughter with her children, seeing the same patience and love reflected that she had poured into Lucy all those years ago. Tommy had indeed taken over the ranch operations, and under his management, the property had grown even more successful. He had married a sweet woman named Emma, and they had 4 children who loved the ranch life as much as their father did. Tommy often said that he owed everything to his parents for giving him and Lucy a home when they had nowhere else to go. But Sarah and Cole always corrected him, insisting that he and Lucy had given them just as much, if not more. Rose had surprised everyone by becoming a traveling musician, playing piano and singing at venues throughout Texas and beyond. She sent letters home regularly, filled with stories of her adventures, and whenever she came home for a visit, which was several times a year, she filled the house with music and laughter. She had never married, claiming she was married to her music, but she was happy and fulfilled, and that was all Sarah and Cole wanted for her. And James, their miracle baby, had grown into a fine young man with a passion for medicine. He had gone east to study and had become a doctor, eventually returning to Salvation to open a practice. He met a lovely woman named Catherine, and they had 2 children who adored their grandparents and loved spending time at the farm. On Cole and Sarah's 50th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the farm for a massive celebration. There were children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren running around, and the house and yard were filled with laughter and love. A long table had been set up outside, loaded with food, and as the sun began to set, everyone gathered around for a meal. Before they ate, James stood up, raising his glass. "I want to say something," he announced, waiting for everyone to quiet down. "As most of you know, I became a doctor because I wanted to help people, to make a difference in the world. But the truth is, I learned everything I know about healing, about what really matters, from my parents." He looked at Sarah and Cole, who were sitting at the head of the table, Cole's arm around Sarah's shoulders. "My mother and father taught me that healing is not just about medicine. It is about seeing people, really seeing them, and believing in their worth even when they cannot see it themselves. They taught me that family is not about blood, but about love and commitment. They taught me that the most powerful thing you can do in this life is to tell someone they are enough, and then spend every day proving it to them." Tears were flowing freely now, not just from Sarah but from many at the table. James continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, Dad, you gave me life, but more than that, you gave me an example of how to live. You showed me what love looks like in action, what it means to be a partner, what it means to build something beautiful out of second chances and grace. Thank you for that. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Everyone raised their glasses, toasting Sarah and Cole, and the couple looked around at the faces of their family, at the life they had built, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. After dinner, as the celebration continued with music and dancing, Sarah and Cole slipped away for a moment, walking hand in hand to the small hill behind the house where they had planted a garden years ago. They stood looking out over their land, watching their family celebrate below, and Sarah leaned into Cole's embrace. "Can you believe this is our life?" she whispered. "All of this, all these people, all this love, it came from one moment of courage. From you stepping in front of me, from you seeing me, from you believing I was enough." Cole turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her face. Even at 75 years old, his eyes still held that same warmth and sincerity she had seen the first day they met. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. Yes, I like to think I helped you see your own worth, but you did the same for me. Before I met you, I was a man without a purpose, drifting through life. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to put down roots, to build something lasting. You gave me a family and a home and a love I never thought I would find. So when you thank me for seeing your worth, know that I am equally grateful that you saw mine." Sarah reached up and cupped his weathered face in her hands. "We really did save each other, did not we?" "Every day," Cole said, kissing her softly. "Every single day for 50 years, and I hope for many more to come." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the music and laughter drifting up from below. Two people who had found each other in the midst of chaos and had built something beautiful out of love and trust, and the simple belief that being enough, just as you are, is the most powerful truth in the world. Sarah thought about the young woman she had been, so certain of her own inadequacy, so convinced that she had nothing to offer. If she could go back and talk to that younger self, she would tell her not to be afraid, that the best was yet to come, that love would find her in the most unexpected way and change everything. But she could not go back, could only move forward, and that was all right because forward had been beautiful. Forward had been worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. Forward had been Cole and their children and grandchildren, and this life that was more than she ever could have dreamed. As they walked back down the hill to rejoin their family, Sarah squeezed Cole's hand and said, "I love you, today, tomorrow, and forever." "Forever," Cole agreed, his smile warm and sure. "That sounds just about right." The party continued late into the night, with stories being told and memories being shared and love flowing as freely as the lemonade and sweet tea. Sarah and Cole held court at the center of it all, answering questions from their grandchildren about the old days, laughing at jokes, and soaking in every precious moment with their family. As the evening wound down and families began to head home or to bed, Lucy approached her parents. She had been quiet most of the evening, and Sarah had noticed her daughter watching them with an unusual intensity. "Mama, Papa, can I talk to you for a minute?" Lucy asked. They moved to the porch, settling into the chairs they had sat in countless times over the years. Lucy sat across from them, her hands twisting in her lap. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, concerned by her daughter's serious expression. Lucy looked up, and there were tears in her eyes. "I have been thinking a lot lately about when Tommy and I first came to live with you. I was so scared and so angry at the world. I thought my life was over, that I would never be happy again. And then you two came along and changed everything." She wiped at her tears, smiling through them. "I want you to know that I remember. I remember every kind word, every patient moment, every time you showed me that I was safe and loved. I remember the day I first called you Mama, and how you told me that I could love both you and my birth mother, that there was room for both. That changed something in me, freed me in a way I did not even know I needed." Sarah reached out and took her daughter's hand, her own eyes filling with tears. "What I am trying to say," Lucy continued, "is thank you. Thank you for taking a chance on two scared, broken children. Thank you for showing us what family really means. Thank you for loving us unconditionally. You gave us everything, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to pass that love on to my own children." Cole cleared his throat roughly, clearly moved. "Lucy, you and Tommy never needed to thank us. You two blessed our lives more than you will ever know. We did not save you, we saved each other." "That is what James was trying to say in his toast," Lucy said. "This family, this incredible thing we all have, it started with you two and your love. Every good thing in my life can be traced back to that day you came to the church and offered us a home. So yes, I am thanking you, because you deserve to be thanked and appreciated and celebrated." Sarah stood up and pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her close like she had when Lucy was a little girl. "I love you so much," she whispered. "You made me a mother, Lucy. You and Tommy taught me what it meant to love a child, and that was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." They stayed on the porch for another hour, talking and reminiscing and soaking in the sweetness of the moment. When Lucy finally left to check on her own children, Sarah and Cole remained, sitting side by side in their favorite chairs. "We did all right, did not we?" Cole asked, his voice quiet in the darkness. "We did better than all right," Sarah replied. "We built something beautiful." The farm continued to be the gathering place for the family for years to come. Every Sunday, those who lived nearby would come for dinner. Every holiday was celebrated with the whole clan present. And every summer, there was a big reunion where even the far-flung members of the family would return home. Sarah and Cole remained active well into their 80s, still tending the garden, still sitting on the porch in the evenings, still very much in love. They were the heart of the family, the example everyone looked to, the proof that love can overcome any obstacle and build something lasting. When Sarah was 84 years old, she fell ill. It was not dramatic or sudden, just a gradual decline that everyone could see coming but hoped would somehow be avoided. Cole never left her side, sleeping in a chair next to their bed so he could be there if she needed anything in the night. One evening, when Sarah was propped up in bed and the family had all come to visit, she looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and felt a peace so profound, it was almost transcendent. "I want you all to know something," she said, her voice weak but clear. "I have lived a beautiful life, the very best life, and it is all because of the love we share, the family we built, and the grace we showed each other." "Mama, do not talk like that," Rose said, tears streaming down her face. "You are going to be fine." But Sarah shook her head gently. "Sweetheart, we all have our time and I am ready. I am not afraid. How could I be afraid when I am surrounded by so much love?" She looked at each of her children in turn. "Lucy, Tommy, Rose, James, you four are my greatest joy. Thank you for being my children, for making me a mother, for filling my life with purpose and love." Then she turned to Cole, who was sitting on the bed beside her, holding her hand. "And you, my love, my partner, my best friend, my everything, thank you for seeing me all those years ago. Thank you for telling me I was enough and spending 56 years proving it. Because of you, I got to live a life beyond my wildest dreams." Cole was crying openly now, this strong man who had weathered so much in his life but could not bear the thought of losing her. "Sarah, I cannot do this without you." "Yes, you can," Sarah said gently, reaching up to touch his face. "You are strong, Cole Hartley, and you have a family who loves you and needs you. Promise me you will keep living, keep loving, keep being the man I fell in love with." "I promise," Cole whispered, pressing his lips to her forehead. "But only if you promise you will wait for me, wherever you are going. Save me a spot on that porch so we can watch the sunset together." Sarah smiled, the beautiful smile that Cole had loved for more than half a century. "It is a promise. I will wait for you, my love. However long it takes." Sarah passed peacefully that night, surrounded by her family, with Cole holding her hand and whispering words of love. Her passing was mourned by the entire community of Salvation, where she had been known and loved for more than 60 years. The church was packed for her funeral, with people standing in the back and spilling out into the yard, all wanting to pay their respects to a woman who had touched so many lives. Cole spoke at the service, his voice steady despite his grief. "My wife Sarah taught me many things in our years together. She taught me about strength, about grace, about the power of love to transform lives. But most importantly, she taught me that worth is not about what we produce or what we can give others. Worth is inherent, built into who we are as human beings. Sarah believed she was broken when I met her, that she had nothing to offer. But I saw the truth that she could not yet see. She was whole and complete and perfect just as she was. And I spent every day of our marriage trying to help her see that too." He paused, looking out at the faces of his family. "Sarah and I did not have a perfect life. We had challenges and struggles like anyone else, but what we had was love. Real, true, enduring love that saw past the surface to the heart of who we really were. And that love built all of this." He gestured to the children and grandchildren filling the pews. "This is Sarah's legacy. Not just the children we raised or the farm we built, but the love we shared and passed on to the next generation." Cole lived for 7 more years after Sarah's death. They were harder years, years where he felt the absence of his partner acutely, but they were not empty. He was surrounded by family, supported by his children, and sustained by the memories of a lifetime spent with the woman he loved. He told stories about Sarah to anyone who would listen, keeping her memory alive and vibrant. He never remarried, never even considered it. "I had my great love," he would say when people asked. "Some people never get that. I got it for 56 years. That is more than enough for any lifetime." Cole passed peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night just after his 91st birthday. His children found him the next morning in his bed, a slight smile on his face, looking more peaceful than he had since Sarah died. On his nightstand was a photograph of Sarah, taken on their 50th wedding anniversary, and a worn book of poetry that had belonged to his mother. They buried Cole next to Sarah in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Salvation. The entire town came out for the funeral, and the family erected a beautiful headstone that read, "Cole and Sarah Hartley, beloved parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Together forever, bound by a love that was always enough." The farm passed to Tommy and his children, but it remained a family gathering place. The house was preserved much as Sarah and Cole had left it, and every generation that came after heard the stories of the cowboy who had stepped in front of a bullet for a stranger, and the woman who had thought she was broken until he showed her otherwise. Their story became a legend in Salvation, told and retold with each generation adding their own memories and perspectives. But at its core, the story remained the same. It was about love that saw past superficial flaws to the truth beneath. About how one person's belief in you can change everything. About how family is built on love rather than biology. And most importantly, about the profound, life-changing power of being told and believing that you are enough. Years turned into decades and decades into generations, but the legacy of Sarah and Cole Hartley lived on. Their descendants carried their values of love, acceptance, and grace into the world, touching lives far beyond the borders of their small Texas town. The farm remained in the family, a physical reminder of what two people could build when they loved each other truly and completely. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting over the prairie in shades of gold and amber, people swore they could still see two figures sitting on the porch of the old Hartley farmhouse, holding hands and watching the day fade into night. Whether it was really them or just tricks of the light, no one could say for certain, but it did not really matter. What mattered was the story, the love, and the truth that had sustained Sarah and Cole throughout their lives and beyond. That being enough, just as you are, is the most powerful truth in the world, and when someone sees that in you and loves you for it, everything becomes possible.